Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishnah Yoma, Parak Dalad, Chapter 4, Mishnah Dalad, Mishnah 4. B'chol Yom. Now, what this Mishnah is going to do, it's going to contrast the Ketores offering, the incense offering, which we know is offered every day of the year. It's offered in the morning and the evening on the altar that is inside of the base, inside the sanctuary, inside the Heichal, inside the base Mikdash building. We know there were two altars. There was one in the courtyard and one inside the base Mikdash building itself. And it was on that altar that the Ketores was brought every day, that the incense was brought every day. On Yom Kippur, that was done, plus there was an offering of incense that the Kohen Gadol did, the high priest did, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Holy of Holies. He didn't do it on the altar. He did it in the Holy of Holies. So the Mishnah is going to show us, is going to point out the differences between the offering of the Ketores all year round and the offering of the Ketores on Yom Kippur. And the many of the things mentioned in this Mishnah that apply on Yom Kippur especially will apply both to the offering of the Ketores in the Holy of Holies and the regular offering of Ketores that's done every day as it's done on Yom Kippur. Just on Yom Kippur, because it was Yom Kippur, it was done differently. So b'chol yom, every day of the year, as we said, as we mentioned yesterday, the Kohen Gadol would go to the altar and he would scoop up some coals, right? Now, every day, and this was done every day. Was it Kohen Gadol? It was a different Kohen, but every day somebody was scooping up the coals. So b'chol yom, every day, he would scoop up the coals using a silver shovel. And then he would empty it into a golden vessel. He scooped it up with one vessel, and then he emptied it into a second vessel. Okay, and it was in that second vessel that he then brought it to the altar to offer. But today, meaning Yom Kippur, he would scoop up the coals with a golden vessel, with a golden shovel, and using that, he would then bring the incense to be offered in the Holy of Holies. So every day, the Kohen would take a silver shovel, he would go up to the altar and he would shovel out some coals, and then he would take that shovel of silver and empty the coals into a golden shovel. Because in essence, the golden shovel was the more respectful shovel. It was the more honorable shovel. And when he actually brought it into the altar to be offered, he used the gold one, which is the one to use. So why didn't he just use the gold one to begin with? Like he does in Yom Kippur, he uses one for both things. Why does he have to every other day start with the silver and go to the gold? The answer is because these shovels, when you use them for scooping up coal, it wears on them. You know, that kind of a thing of scooping up coals, it wears on the shovel.
They're softer metals.
It wears away the shovel. Okay, if a golden shovel wears away, it costs more to replace than a silver one. And since the Torah wants the Beis Hamikdash to be careful with, as we say, Yiddish Geld, money of the Jewish people, because that's where all the money comes from for the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, every day when the shoveling was done, it was done with a less expensive shovel. And if it wears out, you get a different one. It's not as expensive to get a silver one. But when it comes to the actual bringing of the coals in, to actually bring them in to where they have to go for the burning of the incense, then that was done with a golden one. But on Yom Kippur, only one. We only use one. How come on Yom Kippur we only use one? The answer is because on Yom Kippur, we are always trying to put the least amount of work on the Kohen Gadol that we can. The Kohen Gadol has a lot to do on Yom Kippur. He's fasting, and therefore, whatever we can minimize his effort, that's what we do. So on Yom Kippur, we'll shovel out the coals with the golden one, even though it could, somehow or another ruin it or wear it out. But that's because we're doing that on behalf of the Kohen Gadol, that we're trying to ease on it, make things easier for him on Yom Kippur. So that's the first thing. Every day, the shovel that he scooped up the coals with held 4 kavin. That was its volume, 4 kavin. They say here that a kav is the measure of the volume of equivalent of 24 eggs. That's one kav. So that means that this shovel that they were using here every day, that held 4 kavin, held the volume of 24 of 20. If one kav is 24 eggs, then the one of 4 kavin is 4 times 24, right? Now, which sounds like a lot. I don't know. And it's okay. So every day the shovel that he scooped up with was one of a volume of 4 kavin. And we emptied it into the golden shovel. What was the volume of that? Was smaller. It was 3 kavin. Okay, so he started off with a larger shovel. He shoveled up more coal, and then he emptied it into the smaller shovel. Essentially, how much, however they measure this, but essentially the amount of coal that was needed to burn the incense was really 3 kavin. So why did they start up with 4? Because when you start off with 4, if you take a smaller shovel and you empty a bigger shovel into it, that means you have to pile it high, right? Got to pile it high. Pile it high means that we're using a lot, right? When something is piled up high, if it's overflowing, that shows that you want to use a lot, and that's considered an act of respect towards the service of the Beis Hamikdash, the service of the Ketores. So therefore, every day they started with a shovel of 4 kav and emptied into a shovel of 3 kav. But today on Yom Kippur, you scoop it up with a 3 kav shovel, which is the amount that you actually need, and that's what you brought into the sanctuary to offer the incense. Rabbi Yossi says, Yossi says the shovel that they scooped it up with every day was more than 4 kavin. It was a sa. A sa equals 6 kavin. And the 6 kavin one is what they entered into the 3 kavin one. All this was skipped on Yom Kippur to make it easier for the Kohen Gadol. Less effort, the better. Okay, and today, he would scoop it up with a shovel of 3 kav, and that's what he would bring inside. But again, every day he's bringing it inside of the heichal, the sanctuary, onto the golden altar, and the mizbeach hazamet and mizbeach inside the sanctuary. While on Yom Kippur, the special offering on Yom Kippur was done in the Holy of Holies. Now, just want to mention again, what we just mentioned here, okay, about that we make it easier for the Kohen Gadol, that's not only for the Ketores, that the special Ketores of Yom Kippur, the Holy of Holies, but each Ketores that he did on Yom Kippur, he did Ketores 3 times. He did in the morning and the evening on the altar inside the Heichal, and then he did 1 time in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies. Whichever time he was doing Ketores on Yom Kippur, he did it the easier way. It was all about making it easier on him. Even though this was what was being done on Yom Kippur twice, was what you did every day, but Yom Kippur was done differently. Next, B'chol Yom Ha'isa Kveda. Every day the shovel was heavy. It was heavier. It was a thicker shovel. The sides were thicker. A thicker shovel lasts longer. V'hayim Kala. But today, meaning on Yom Kippur, it was a lighter one. B'chol Yom Ha'isa Yad Katsara. Every day the handle was a short handle. V'hayim Aruka. But today on Yom Kippur, it was a long one. Now, here's how they explain this. And what's the difference? What's the difference of a short handle or a long handle? Short handle, shorter, and long was a longer one. What was the purpose? What was the longer handle going to do? So they explain like this: the Kohen Gadol, I'm not sure exactly how this works, but the Kohen Gadol tucked the end of the handle under his armpit and let the rest of the handle rest on his arm. No. Meaning, he must have had it tucked in over here. Or, I don't know how exactly. And it was resting on his arm. So that, again, was all meant to make it easier for him. So every other day he has a short handle. He's got to be able to, he needs the muscle in his arm to be able to hold it up. And like this, he has the support of his whole arm to be able to carry it. So that's why on Yom Kippur, the handle was longer. B'chol Yom Hayazava Yarek. Every day it was made of yellow gold. B'hayom Adayim. and today it was red gold. They explained red gold was the most expensive type and was therefore used on this special occasion. Then they add, here in the notes, even the shovel used on Yom Kippur for the twice daily Ketores offering was made of red gold. Okay, the one that was used for the regular daily Ketores on Yom Kippur was also made of special gold. Now, the other things that we mentioned, or as we mentioned before, were to make it easier for the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. And it makes sense. It should be easier for him, whether it's the Yom Kippur Ketores or the daily Ketores. Either way, we're trying to make it easier for him. You know, it's not easier whether it's red gold or it's yellow gold. No difference. That doesn't make it any easier or not. And one might think that, okay, the red gold, that's for the Yom Kippur service, and the yellow gold is for you'll use the yellow gold for the Ketores, the daily Ketores that you use, that you bring every day, and then Yom Kippur you bring it also. That's just a regular daily Ketores. Maybe that one wouldn't have to be made of red gold. And the answer was it was, because basically once the shovels used for the daily Ketores were the same as the one used for the Yom Kippur Ketores, guarding this aspect was also. Those shovels used for the daily Ketores were also made from the red gold. Divrei Rabbi Menachem, these are the words of Rabbi Menachem. Okay, now we just, until now we were contrasting the Ketores brought every day and the Ketores brought on Yom Kippur. Now we're going to contrast the Yom Kippur Ketores with the daily Ketores, which would include on Yom Kippur itself too. B'chol yoim, every day, makriv pras b'shachris upras ben arbayim. A pras is a weight. And the amount of Ketores that was offered in every day, you had a pras in the morning and you had a pras in the afternoon. As we said, the Ketores was brought in the morning and the afternoon. How much Ketores was brought? The weight of a weight of a pras. V'hayoim, today on Yom Kippur, meis b'lei chafnav. When he brings an additional Ketores, how much does he bring? B'lei chafnav. B'lei chafnav means hit 2 handfuls. His handfuls. The Kohen Gadol, as we're going to learn further on, cupped his hands together and used them to scoop the Ketores out of its container. That's what he did on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, the Ketores had a container. How did he take it out of the container? He took his hands, he cupped his hands, and he scooped it out. And that was the amount of Ketores. Whatever came up in his 2 hands, that was the amount of Ketores that he brought for the special Yom Kippur offering of Ketores in the Holy of Holies. So every day you've got an exact weight. It's called a manna. A manna in the morning and a morning of night. That's the weight of the incense that's burned. On Yom Kippur, the amount of incense burned is whatever fills his 2 hands. Okay. Every day the Ketores was ground very fine. It was of a very fine consistency. And today on Yom Kippur, the special Ketores was the finest of the fine. Daka min adaka, finest of the fine. The fact that the Ketores has to be ground up fine is a Torah requirement. The Torah tells us you got to grind it up fine. What does fine mean exactly? I'm not sure, but you grind it up fine. On Yom Kippur, we learn and we derive that you got to take the daily daily Ketores that's been it's not ground every day. It was ground before. Whenever it's prepared, it's ground. And it's left in a container, and that's what they use every day. On Yom Kippur, you had to take the Ketores that was already ground for the regular Ketores and regrind it again. So that it would be even finer for being brought on Yom Kippur. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.